A Brooklyn native, man, our main man, senior writer, Dan Devine joins us. Dan, how you doing, brother? Appreciate you.
I'm doing well. I'm to be brought in with the energy of praying for happiness is extremely excited. Yeah, it's blessings on blessings on blessings this morning. So I'm happy to be with you guys.
Now, did I pronounce your last name correctly or no?
You absolutely did. You got the whole bio down. You nailed the name. We're off to a flying start.
You got a legendary name, by the way, Notre Dame legend, by the way. So I was like, oh, who the fuck is on? And I was like, let me make sure this ain't the Notre Dame coach. I don't think he's with us anymore. Rest in peace. So,
I was going to say, you know what? It was a real trip was being a sophomore in college, waking up and seeing Dan Devine dead. It was a wild morning on that Tuesday in Providence College.
Yeah, not to laugh at that, but yeah, that would have been.
You probably getting called like, Dan, are you? Are you good?
How's Rudy? But anyway,
you know what? He was undersized, and I shouldn't even have got him on the field in the first place. Not for nothing.
No doubt, he got that D. He got that sack. He got that sack. Man, Dad, appreciate you joining us. We got a lot going on. Obviously, the hoops world starts back up tomorrow, Game 3. I asked Smitty on our poll question to start this show off. I said, does Game 3 winner win it all? I'm going to make a future bet tonight. I'm going to say yes, even though I don't think the Pacers have won a Game 3 yet during the playoffs. But I think the Game 3 winner wins this thing. Am I crazy to say that?
Not crazy at all. I mean, if it is Indiana, then you're talking about them being able to counterpunch against what we saw from Oklahoma City in Game 2, where it looked like a lot more like what I think everybody expected this series to look like, where the Thunder have been a dominant team all season long. That defense being able to really tamp down on Tyrese Halliburton, constrict Indiana's freedom of movement, get out and run, and then just be able to spread the floor on offense, get downhill, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in the paint, drive and kick, spray out, guys knocking down threes. Like that was, I think, what everyone kind of anticipated this would look like. What happened in the last few minutes of Game 1 was kind of the outlier. So if you're seeing Indiana come out in Game 3 with some answers to that, shift the run of play back in their direction, then yeah, we're talking about they've still got home court advantage. They're up 2-1, and Oklahoma City's got to find some answers. Whereas if what we see tonight is a continuation of Game 2, then I think we all look at it and say, oh man, OKC's got home court back. Their defense is ramped up. They're able to get downhill and score. They've got more answers than the Pacers do. And then I think you start looking at saying, are we looking at maybe, I don't know, like an 0-1 Lakers type situation where they drop that first game to AI, but then wind up ripping off 4 straight. I think with whichever team comes out of Game 3 with that momentum, I think you're absolutely right to look at that and say they got a great leg up on the rest of the series.
You mentioned a good point. You mentioned how this last game, you feel like it's how majority of fans and analysts thought the series would go. I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana, so I got a question. Why is it that the Pacers just haven't really, I guess, still earned the respect of being a great team this season? I mean, they're in the NBA Finals. They knocked out number 2 seed in the Cavs. They beat Giannis and the Bucks. They beat a Knicks team that was on fire, playing with toughness and grittiness, who knocked out the defending champions and the Celtics. Why has the Pacers just not got that respect yet?
Well, I think it's 2 things. One, it's to me less about the Pacers not getting respect and more like you're talking about a 68-win juggernaut in Oklahoma City, right? Like this to me is like a lot of respect for them. But the flip side of it is I think a lot of people, looked at Indiana for what they did last year and said, yeah, making the Eastern Conference Finals is nice and all, but then you start listing off all the injured players that were on those teams that they went past, right? So they looked at it and said, I'm a little bit shaky on what they did in the 2024 postseason. The start of this season, they start out 10-15. They're under 500 heading into January. Now, there's valid reasons for that. There's explanations. You lost Andrew Nembhard and Aaron Nesmith to injury early on in the season. You lost Ben Shepherd, so you're down like 3 of your top wings right off the rip. You lost both of your backup centers to ruptured Achilles tendons in the first week of the season, so you're playing small all for basically 2-3 months. And then Tyrese Halliburton coming off of the back injuries and hamstring injuries that he suffered late last season, aggravated those during the Olympics. He wasn't really himself to start the season. So the Pacers just kind of didn't look like themselves for, 20% of the season. And I think if you checked in on Indiana early in the year, you were like, see, I told you so. That like what they did last spring kind of didn't really carry over. And then come to find out, once they got healthy, once they got their, another couple of bigs in the rotation, once they were able to get themselves back to that kind of ecosystem Rick Carlisle talks about, they've been fantastic basically since the early December, mid-December. And then I think the second best record in the NBA behind Oklahoma City since January 1st. So I think part of it is just a lot of respect for what OKC's done. And part of it is people checked in on Indiana early early and never checked back. So then, like, all of a sudden, you kind of come back to it in springtime, and you're like, wait, they were 11th. How are they the 4 seed now? Wait a second. That team couldn't stop anybody. They've been a top 10 defense for 5 months, and, like, you didn't update your priors a little bit. And I think what we've seen throughout this postseason is they've been this team. They've earned this level of respect. They're kind of just starting to get it now. Unfortunately, it's coming against a team that's awfully good in Oklahoma City.
Got you.
No doubt. You're in Brooklyn, right?
Right now, I'm in Indianapolis, Indiana, man, getting ready to come to you for game 3 and 4.
But your home base is Brooklyn?
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you, just talking Brooklyn Nets for whatever reason. And I want to transition to, obviously, the Knicks, who get a little bit more notoriety. Where are you? What are you hearing in the offseason here as far as those two teams, what they're going to do? Obviously, I know the Knicks have talked to or trying to get a hold of maybe Jason Kidd and some other names. I've even heard Spoelstra. His name out there, which is crazy, right? Where are you at with hearing what is the Knicks going to do with the coach, and then where are they going to do with maybe Giannis or a KD or anything like that? And then what are the Nets doing now as far as the rebuild in that franchise?
Yeah, I think the Nets, from their perspective, it's a little bit still stay low and build. You know, they dropped down in the draft lottery. I think they have the 8th pick coming up in June's draft. But I think if they had their choice, they would be in the big game hunting, like going for somebody like Giannis, trying to roll up their draft capital and roll up some of their young players to bring a star in to expedite things. But I'm not sure they're going to have the opportunity to do that. Remains to be seen. You don't know who the next contestant on the disgruntled star looking to get to a big market is going to be. So, stay tuned there. But I think I wouldn't be surprised if it's another continual, like, let's continue to rebuild, see what kind of, maybe like overlooked young talent we can get in, rehab, build up the value of them, and maybe get back toward contention a little bit. And then with the Knicks, I mean, everything stems from who's your coach. I think a lot of people were stunned by the decision to move on from Tom Thibodeau. I think people who are more plugged into the team over the course of the past several months saw that things were a little bit shakier than you might have expected from outside, given the way that offense and the way had really cratered or leveled off, I guess I'd say, since the beginning of January. They kind of never seemed to have real tactical answers to when teams cross-match their smalls onto Karl Anthony Towns. It kind of vaporized the Towns, Jalen Brunson pick and roll. It always felt like that offense was a little bit less than the sum of its parts, some of the talent there. And then you go on, like, even if all that's true, even if you've been kind of a shaky team, over-reliant on an underperforming starting lineup for months, I mean, you go in, you win 2 playoff rounds, you knock off the defending champions, and you get within 6 wins of the championship, like the first Eastern Conference Finals berth in 25 years. If you can get that far and get canned, is anybody's job safe in the NBA? And I think the answer is no. If you expect championship level results and you fall even a little bit short of that, whatever the explanation is, I think you wind up with front offices and ownership looking and saying, can we do better? And the question now is, who is better? Who's the option? Because the reporting all around that situation is you're looking for head coaches of other teams currently under contract, and those teams can just say, if you ask for permission, nah, you can't go have our guy. We like our guy. Right. We want to be a playoff team. We want to contend for a championship. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty around what that situation is going to wind up looking like, who's going to wind up coming in and taking that gig. And I think everything stems down from there, because if you bring in a head coach, if I'm the guy like interviewing for that job, I'm saying, all right, are you planning to uproot half this roster to go try to get Giannis? Or am I coaching this team as it exists? I want to know what that kind of future outlook is before I put pen to paper there. So a lot of uncertainty, a surprising amount for a team coming off one of its best seasons in decades.
Is there some nepotism in play where are the players or the fan base, or I'm hearing rumors, and I know Jalen a little bit, and we talk. Are you seeing some like nepotism discontent with the team? I'm hearing Jalen Brunson's pops is not really liked there, so to speak, and who knows why that is, and that's or is it rumor? But can he be gone as well?
I mean, I can't speak to that. If you bring in a new head coach, I think there's always a chance that the assistant coaching rank could change. Obviously, the dynamic is very different there, considering one of the assistant coaches is the father of your superstar player, who, by the way, last summer took kind of a sweetheart hometown discount to be able to give you guys the financial flexibility to make some of the moves that you wanted to make. So there's multiple levels of discourse there. You're talking about the vice president of basketball, or the president of basketball operations is his godfather. There's like a whole the nepotism discourse in New York is that like the entire organization is family. So it's a little bit tricky. But with respect to what, if you're a head coach coming in, yeah, you probably want to know the lay of the land too. Am I going to have to make sure I keep this assistant coach on? If I don't think that he's the best fit for what I want to run, what kind of how I want to divide up the labor here, do I have the freedom to be able to move on from Rick Brunson on the bench? That's one of a number of questions that would have to get answered. But yeah, I think to your point about like the rumblings of discontent and, players unhappy, who liked this, who didn't like that, it does seem like at least part of this, some of it is, I think the front office looked at it and said, we gave you a roster, we gave Tom Thibodeau a roster that was designed to play a certain way offensively. You bring Karl Anthony Towns in, his shooting, his offensive abilities, you want to play more 5 out, space the floor, you want to be a high octane offense. And Tom Thibodeau much more frequently put Josh Hart out there as a non-shooter because he absolutely loves Josh Hart. Everything Josh Hart brings to the table with his energy, intensity, the way he can get going off fast breaks, all that kind of stuff. But a non-shooter that gave teams some sort of options to play with in terms of how they could defang the Knicks offense. I think they were looking at it and saying, we didn't think Tom Thibodeau was going to change. We didn't think he was going to update the way he was going to operate offensively. And I think that rubbed some of the players the wrong way. Obviously, there was the issue with Mikal Bridges in Portland where he's saying to reporters, we've got some guys on the bench here who can play. Maybe we can give them some minutes. Maybe we don't have to lean on the starters quite so much. And then Tom Thibodeau goes out and plays him, I think, like 52 minutes in an overtime game that night. So there might have been some rubber meat in the road in terms of the way that the rotation was being handled, the way Tom Thibodeau wanted to run things, and the way the players might have wanted things to look. Now you got to look at, is whoever's going to come in going to be a little bit more amenable to some of those things? Very much remains to be seen. And I think a lot of questions still to be answered.
Last thing, Smitty, I have for him, staying in that East over there, because there's, Boston obviously just won it, and now Tatum's going to be out. Is the Big Three era? I've been saying this on here a while. Is it dead? Is it dead? Is it gone? I mean, Brooklyn, speaking of where you're at, had Harden and KD and Kyrie and couldn't do anything. They even had Ben Simmons later. Didn't do anything with that. Are they looking to be a little bit organic, homegrown, like some of these teams we see in Pacers and OKC, and even though they got Alexander in the trade from the Clippers, but they're a lot more homegrown. I'm seeing a lot more youth building from within instead of the Big Three chase that LeBron era kind of started in Miami. Are you seeing that as well? And is Boston screwed this next year? And is the East wide open next year and still returning to Cleveland and Indiana possibly with this whole transition with the Knicks coaching and everything?
Yeah, the whole conference is basically in upheaval at this point. I think your point on the move from a Big Three model to a little bit more decentralized, I think that really starts with Boston last year, right? Where it's not just, do you have the Big Three? It's like, do you have the Big Six? You need a whole starting lineup and Al Horford, right? You need to have, or bring in Peyton Pritchard. You need to be able to go 7-8 deep with guys that you can trust and you can kind of run out in any combination. And ideally that you're not paying 3 of those guys like 90% of the salary cap, because I think that's where what we're seeing is like the downstream effects of the changes in the collective bargaining agreement, where it's the penalties for taxpayers are so severe. The payments out of pocket for if you're deep into the tax for a number of years are so punitive. And then the team building restrictions, where if you go over that first apron, that second apron, you're really limited in terms of some of the trades you can make, some of the flexibility you have to change your roster around. So if you're paying 3 max level guys and you don't have the depth behind it, and you don't have the flexibility to be able to pivot and change things if stuff's not working, you're in a real tight spot. So I think you see more teams like Oklahoma City and Indiana, in part because they can't just go out and shop at the supermarket for free agents, right? They can't get every superstar because they're smaller market teams, that those free agents are less likely to want to go to those markets in free agency, not because the Thunder and Pacers are bad. In fact, they've been excellent for most of their existence at this point, but they're just not generally going to get those high profile free agents. So then what do? You got to build from the middle. You got to nail your draft picks. You got to nail your trades, and you got to build a team that can go 10, 11, 12 deep instead of being so top heavy. Miles Turner, after they won the Eastern Conference Finals, said, I think that we're kind of the new blueprint for the NBA, the way things are moving. It's going to be about depth, about the pace of play, about getting shot making all over the floor and having multiple guys who can get it done. Now, when you don't have that number one guy, like if Tyrese Halliburton has a quiet game, I think that looks a whole lot louder in this kind of build. But if you can build as Oklahoma City has with a ton of that depth, and you got that dude that with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, he's going to get you 30 damn near every night. It puts you in a position where you can kind of throw wave after wave of defenders and floor spacing offensive players, guys who can play up tempo with fast pace. You can throw waves at opponents, and it becomes an extremely difficult thing to guard and to deal with offensively. So, I mean, building a team this way is not easy, but I think the success that we've seen now with Oklahoma City the last couple of years, with Indiana getting to 2 straight conference finals and getting to the finals, I think you're going to see a lot of teams looking to see how they can replicate it and build not just through that 2 main guys, 3 main guys, but maybe 1 or 2 main guys, and then a lot of depth underneath that. It's going to be tricky to be able to do that, but if you can do that, the dividends could really speak for themselves.
My follow-up question to that is, I guess from your perspective, do you think this is good for the NBA though, from a rating standpoint, from a fan base? Because I saw something, I don't know if it's verified or not, but like the game 1 of the finals, like the ratings were like the lowest it has been in years. You compared to previous years' finals. Like, is the Big 3 model better for the NBA as a brand because there's more notable names that the average everyday fan knows? Or do you think this is actually like, because we're seeing good basketball. Like, if you're a real basketball fan, then you're excited for OKC and the Pacers. But 2 small markets, even though SGA is the MVP, he doesn't have that like personality that just puts him out there. Tyrese Halliburton, he's a guy who's like a rising star who people are finally starting to say, okay, he is a star. So, like, when you put all that together, do you think this is good or actually kind of bad for the NBA?
Well, okay, I'm of 2 minds about it because, one, like, you mentioned that these guys don't have a whole lot of curb appeal, right? They're not household names. Right. How do you get guys to be household names? You got to win, and you got to make deep playoff runs, and you got to do it consistently. So this is the time of year where you build up that recognition. A hell of a lot more people know Tyrese Halliburton's name today than they did before game 1 of the NBA Finals, right? Sure. And you watch that guy do something special. A lot more people, casual fans, might be familiar with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander here, that he scored more points in the first 2 games of the finals than anybody has in their first 2 final games ever. And if he's going to be up here putting 30 up every night, and they go out and they win the NBA championship, and he wins finals MVP to go with conference finals MVP to go with season MVP, that's one of the best seasons in NBA history. So then we're talking about a story to tell, a story to sell. And so that becomes about what the league can market and whether the league puts its muscle behind it. So there's not the ready-made out the box, curb appeal of it's LeBron versus Steph, and you've been knowing these guys for 15 years. But what the NBA needs to be doing, and what people, frankly, who cover the league need to be doing, we need to be explaining to people and putting them in position to understand, here's why you should care about this. These guys are hooping, they're special, they're what's next. So can we put this in front of you and get you to a place where you're going to be more interested in it, where you care about it? And I promise you, all those things, one of the things that we run into a lot of times with the more casual audience, right, is, nah, it's all threes. Nah, nobody plays defense. Nah, it's you have 2 superstars and then nobody else matters. The only thing that matters is what happens in the last 2 minutes of the game. You run into all these critiques, right? Mm-hmm. You watch this series, you got teams that are defending. You got teams that are not just all about the 3-point game, that are running up and down the court, that are spreading the floor, that are getting downhill, getting into the paint. You got collisions at the rim, shot blocking. You got, it's not just, 2 old guys pounding the rock forever. It's speed, it's precision. It's an attractive brand of ball. So I feel like if you somebody in the front door and say, like, I bet if you check this out for 5 minutes, you're going to find something to dig. Yeah. I think I'm of the belief that chances are people are going to wind up coming away from it thinking, maybe the game's a little bit different than what I thought it was. Maybe the talent, the up-and-coming dudes are a little bit different than what I remember from everybody being mad at James Harden 5 years ago. So whether that winds up being the case, whether that winds up being high ratings, I mean, the NBA just signed a $76 billion broadcast rights deal. I don't think their pockets are going to be hurting for a while. They're bringing in Amazon and NBC next year to be able to be new broadcast partners, ESPN, ABC, Disney. They have like these massive partnerships. And there's no shortage of eyeballs that are going to be on the game. Just a matter of what you can deliver to those eyeballs and how you present it. So you're right that the numbers might look good, and there might be there might not look so great. There might be a lot of discourse about, is this bad for the league? To me, if you can grow something from this, though, you could reap long-term benefits in terms of introducing new stars and putting a spin on the way that people are seeing the game. And I think that could help everybody.
Smitty and I argue. I don't agree basketball is good at all anymore. But you did make some points on the finals. These two teams are a little bit different than what we've seen throughout the playoffs. I think it's been more 25-point blowouts in the history of the game ever in this playoff run. The Western Conference Finals were a joke. It was 4 out of 5 were 30-point blowouts. I mean, basketball has gotten bad, in my opinion. Now, to your point, though, these two small market teams may be able to change that because the big three goes away, to my first point. I think that's where we are more organic, and we're going to start from within and in the draft. OKC still has what? 4 big-time draft picks next year in the draft? Like, they're only going to be able to gain assets, get rid of some.
He's amazing.
Yeah, who knows? OKC seems bright, but we had an OKC insider on, and we asked, like, is it a free agent attraction, though, city? Like Indianapolis, I think Indianapolis is a much better city than OKC, and I love Oklahoma, but it's not a free agent attraction. There's not much to do there, but OKC. That's why they sell out. Shout out to their fan base. But, like, do you see that going on? What's the next small market team that gets in the mix of this? Is it an Orlando who has a promising young crew? Yeah. Is it
Detroit looks good. I know Detroit's a little bit of a bigger city, though, but still Detroit looks good.
Yeah, but I don't know if Detroit's considered small market. It could be in basketball. Right. I don't know, but I'm just saying, like, is this the new norm that you're seeing in the inside?
I would say you're right about the lack of free agent attractiveness of some of these markets, but I think that's why they're built the way these teams are building the way they are. They're building through the draft. They're building through being able to try to win trades and get talent in that way. Look at the lists of available free agents in the next couple of seasons. You're not seeing a ton of like rising star level names. There's a lot of older guys on shorter contracts that are probably not going to be, particularly interested in going to some of those small market teams anyway. So if you're a team that is in that, like, we're trying to figure out how we build from the middle or how we revamp without necessarily tanking all the way out to get a top 2 or 3 pick, it's going to be through you use your cap space to bring on contracts and trades and take a shot on a young player who maybe could use a new scenery, or to get more draft picks in the door to be able to use those in trades, or to get multiple bites at the apple like Oklahoma City has been able to do. And so there's a lot of different ways to accumulate talent. It's just you're not always going to be able to shop at the free agent store. So I think that's one part of it, and why you see a lot more teams looking to build that way. Orlando is a really interesting one because they've got those 2 big point forward kind of players in Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner. And it is Florida, it is no state tax, it is good weather. They got to find a guard who can shoot. They desperately need, and they have that now for several years, because of the way they play. They want to build through their defense. They want to be huge, length everywhere. They want to be a nasty defensive team, and they've got those 2 bigs. They want to keep the ball in their hands, but they got to find a guard who can shoot. Well, it remains to be seen if they're going to be able to do that. I love Detroit as a shout there. Cade Cunningham really came into his own, but I think similarly you saw against the New York Knicks, they need another ball handler. They need another shot creator to be able to take some of the burden off of him. They're hopeful that that's Jaden Ivey, who missed most of the season with an injury, but had looked like he maybe had turned a corner early on in the season before he went down with the broken leg. So but again, that's a team that had to build through the draft and then was not going to be able to get a ton of free agents in the door. So they had to build with, lower key free agents and through the draft and trying to win some trades. It took them a few years, but now they're back kind of on the precipice. I think so. If you're one of these teams, that's the idea. And Adam Silver was sort of has been clear about this, the commissioner of the NBA. He said it during his pre-finals press conference. The idea behind some changes they've made to the collective bargaining agreement, the way the rules work in the NBA, it's not to like enforce NFL style parity, but to basically create what he calls a parity of opportunity. If you manage your cap well, if you manage your organization well, then you have the chance to rise up quickly, to be able to get back into a competitive situation. I don't know if you guys can look very much further than Oklahoma City was down for basically 2 years after the Paul George and Russell Westbrook trades. They had that one kind of fun Chris Paul year, but where it was like the surprise playoff run, but then down for 2 years, right back up into it. And then with the Pacers, they were, in the playoffs consistently, those Nate McMillan years. They take 1 or 2 years off. They make the Tyrese Halliburton trade. They're right back in that thing 2 years later, consecutive conference finals. So like the opportunity is there if you are able to manage it right, whether you're a big market, a small market, or anywhere in between, but you got to nail those moves if you're going to be building from the middle.
Let me ask you, you cover you write for all these different teams and stories. Let me ask you, the big market teams, what are you noticing or seeing, or maybe you have some fact-based information? Why is Miami struggling to attract free agents now? Why are the Lakers, Clippers, where are the big markets going? Is it just back to our point about the small organic teams, or is this something that you see trending? Miami struggling to keep a guy like Jimmy Butler. I tell Smitty every day, I think it's player empowerment, also demanding trades, demanding the James Hardens of the world that says, get me out of here 3 different times to 3 different organizations. Are you seeing that the big markets are struggling more and more to keep talent?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, one thing, the Lakers just turned Anthony Davis, who they had signed, they just turned him into Luka Doncic, and they still got LeBron James. So I think like LA is going to be all right in terms of star power. The Clippers, they move on from Paul George. They're able to keep Harden with Kawhi Leonard. They spread out kind of Paul George's money among a number of different contributors. They get right back to 50 wins and back into the playoffs. So and then with New York, they've spent their money. They brought in Karl Anthony Towns alongside Jalen Brunson. They trade OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges. So not like marquee superstar Stephen LeBron level names, but like big fish that you go and get in those markets. Miami is an interesting one because that's not like they can't keep Jimmy Butler. I think that was more of a personality clash of Pat Riley saying, if Jimmy Butler is going to be injured and missing games, and he's in his mid-30s, we don't necessarily need to be paying him top dollar. And Jimmy Butler said, like, you guys were a 500 or worse team until I got here and then brought us back to the finals. So, like, you do need to pay me because I'm the guy who lifted this whole thing up. That becomes a staring contest. Though, those two sides wind up going their separate ways. So with Miami, it's not so much that they're not able to attract talent. It's they did attract the talent. They made 2 finals in a few years, made a couple of deep playoff runs, and now they're kind of in a reset and they're trying to figure out what's next. I'm not sure exactly what that's going to be. Well, how they build around Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero, what they've got down there. My guess would be, though, when you talk about a big free agent or big names hitting the market, Miami is going to come up because Miami is Miami. So those guys are going to want to get down there and play there. I don't imagine that they're going to have a hard time at least making the sale of the local environment, let's say, to those free agents. But to me, it's less that the big markets can't attract those players. It's the big markets kind of took their shots and they got a lot of those guys in the door and they've had a lot of success with them. And then now you're talking about sometimes teams just sort of cycle out, or you go 2-3 years, you've got to pivot, you've got to find a new way of approaching things. And into that void, you've seen Oklahoma City ready to pounce. You've seen Indiana ready to pounce. Boston 2 years ago ready to pounce. So it's just, again, more to that parity of opportunity, more so than like the big markets are falling off. Although, if we're talking this time next year and it's, Cleveland and Oklahoma City again, or something like that, then maybe we got to take a look at what's the, what the impact of some of these changes is. But my guess is those larger markets are not going to be without star level talent for too long.
Do you see Riley going after Giannis at all?
I think if Pat Riley gets a shot at anybody who's awesome, he's going to try to take it. But I think the question is, if I'm Milwaukee, is what you can give me from the Miami Heat that is still going to leave a Miami Heat team there for Giannis to go to? Is that going to be worth my while if I'm the Milwaukee Bucks? And my guess is the answer to that is probably no. I think if we start throwing the bidding open, my guess is that there's going to be a lot of teams with offers more palatable to the Bucks than what the Heat can do. But listen, if Giannis said, if he throws it down on the table and says, I'm going there, whatever you can get it, then fine. But listen, Damian Lillard tried to do that a couple of years ago, and the Bucks held, or the Blazers held firm, and all of a sudden, the deal doesn't materialize in the way that Dame thought. So I would be surprised if it transferred that way. But listen, who knows? Things can get awful wild after we get past the finals, into the draft and into free agency, and there might be an awful lot of movement this summer. So we'll have to see where it goes.
100%. My last question, and I'm pretty sure I already kind of have your answer, but who do you got winning the NBA Finals, and why?
I was on Oklahoma City from September, when we first had to do our predictions before the season. I've been on Oklahoma City the whole season. I'm sick with it now. Before the series and our preview at Yahoo Sports, I had Oklahoma City in 6. Again, no lack of respect for Indiana, more an overwhelming amount of respect for Oklahoma City. To me, the what they're able to do on the defensive end to play at that same kind of frenzied pace that Indiana does, but keep them out of the paint, keep them from being able to get downhill to create the good shots that the Pacers have been thriving on, those kick out threes, the swing ball movement, wide open shots. You didn't see nearly as many of those in game 2. I think if that is able to continue, then it becomes so much more difficult for Indiana to score enough points to be able to match where SGA is going to give you 30 every night. Man, Rick Carlisle said it the other night. You can basically pencil him in for 34 before he even gets on the plane. So if the Pacers are not going to be able to score enough to stay with what Shea is going to generate night in and night out, it's going to be awful tough sledding for them. And I think that Oklahoma City is just better on both ends of the floor than what Indiana is going to be able to put together. The Pacers, if you get into get it late, get it close, they are a shot-making demon. You can't count them out. But I think if the Pacers if the Thunder are able to do what they did in game 2 and extend that advantage, keep them at bay so it doesn't even get to a 15 or 12 or 10 late in the game, I think they got a great shot at being able to rip off, if not 3 straight to make this a 4-1 series, then maybe 3 out of the next 4.
Let me ask you this.
We shall see.
Let me ask you. This guy's from Naptown, so Dan. So
no, he's in my city right now. He's in my city right now.
That's
Make sure
exactly
you stop
right.
by St. Elmo's or Kilroy Sports Bar tonight and get you a nice meal.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Hey, Dan, last thing. I don't believe there's any open vacancies anymore with the Pacers. I mean, with the Suns signing their assistant or whatever. So what is in the future? What do you see or hear about Mike Malone, Thibodeau, some of these veteran guys what are they doing this next year?
Yeah, well, the only open vacancy right now is New York, and I would be surprised if Tib. I mean, I don't think Tibbs is going to go right back there. Mike Malone is temperamentally is extremely similar to Tom Thibodeau, and also I don't know something about the vibe of him being very similar and also having gotten run out of his last job because he had a clash with the front office over playing young guys and not overplaying his starters. Feels like a little bit, that rhymes a little too much for, I think, the New York to go that way. I think there's a really good chance that some of those guys, take a year off, do TV. Tom Thibodeau is about to make $30+ million guaranteed to not work. So while he might be the only guy out there who would rather have the job than the money to not work, he might be able to just kind of coast and kick his feet up a little bit. Michael Malone. He doesn't like when you say Mike. Michael Malone already had some success doing TV with the Western Conference Final. So maybe he goes and does some more of that. And then, you got your, Mike Budenholzers and Frank Vogels. And, maybe you see some of these guys do consulting work, because, go be an assistant someplace just to keep themselves hot and warm and in the mix. But, there's not a whole lot of open spots. And there's a lot of championship caliber coaches that are on the outside looking in right now.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Great insight. Wealth of knowledge, man. I can't thank you enough for hopping on here, man, and popping in here. And good luck in Naptown, and enjoy, be safe, and hopefully we'll have you on again maybe when the finals are done.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate you coming on.